Hi guys. This is the unit on classification. Classification is a scientific discipline known as taxonomy. And taxonomy is the science of describing an organism, naming it, and then classifying it. So grouping them together based on their characteristics, both physical and genetic. All right, so how do we know who's more closely related, a plant and a mushroom, or a plant and a human? And so we would look at physical characteristics and genetic code to figure out who's more closely related, and then we put them into a chart. That chart is the taxonomic classification chart. Okay? So, scientists use a taxonomic classification system to group, name, and describe organisms. Organisms can be separated into three main domains based on their characteristics. And the three domains are domain bacteria, domain archaea, and domain eukarya. I'm going to go through each one of these, and then you can fill out your notes. Domain bacteria. These guys are all prokaryotic. And if you remember prokaryotic, this means they have no nucleus and no membrane-bound organelles. All right, so when we drew the bacterium, you had your cell wall, inside is the cell membrane, then you have all your genetic material, you have the material to digest stuff, you have stuff to make energy from food and chemicals. So you have everything that a cell needs. It's just not all packaged, all nice and neat inside organelles. Okay? Then you have domain archaea. Archaea, archaeology, means ancient. So these are the oldest things. These are also bacteria-like, but they're a little bit different. They are prokaryotic. All right? They look the same. They have their cell wall, the cell membrane, and then all the stuff that's inside. The difference between these guys, though, is that their cell wall can withstand extreme environments. So you're going to find these guys in volcanoes. You're going to find them in like deep, deep, deep sea where there's incredible pressures. And in the hydrothermal vents that are down there, it's boiling water, thousands of degrees, extreme pressure. These guys love it. They thrive there. It would kill these guys. Okay? And then also deep in the ice. So if you have an ice shelf and it's 2 miles deep, there's still life in there, but it's going to be in this category of living things. So we're categorizing things based on their major characteristics. These guys are prokaryotic, all right, and they are found everywhere, found almost everywhere. This is the bacteria on your skin, on the desks, on water fountains, on the floor, on your clothes. It's everywhere. It's in us. It doesn't hurt us. Some of them do if they're pathogenic, which means causing disease. But for the most part, bacteria are just everywhere. They break stuff down. They kind of recycle all the nutrients in the atmosphere and on Earth when they're just decomposers. Okay, they're found everywhere. These guys do the same thing, but they're found in extreme environments. And then we get to domain eukarya, which is what the category we fall into. This means they're eukaryotic, which means they have a nucleus and they have organelles. So you have your cell membrane. If it's a plant, it's going to have a cell wall also. It's got the nucleus with the genetic material in there. You've got lysosomes to digest stuff, ribosomes to read the genetic message and make proteins. There's mitochondria for energy. All right, so this stuff is filled with stuff. You got your cytoplasm, that's the liquid everything floats around in. Okay, your Golgi and your endoplasmic reticulum. All right, so this is the difference between a eukaryotic and a prokaryotic cell. These guys have all their material packaged really nicely inside membranes. These guys don't, okay? So everything we find on Earth is going to fall into one of these three main categories. But sometimes you need to be a little bit more specific. What type of bacteria are you talking about? Where is it found? Which one? All right, which thing that has nuclei are we talking about? Are we talking about plants or animals? Okay, so after you have these three domains, you're going to break it down even further. And you're going to break it down into the 6-kingdom classification system. So you're going to use this when you need to be even more specific. I can take, okay, so domain bacteria are your eubacteria. Domain archaebacteria, or excuse me, domain archaea is archaebacteria. And then your protists, fungi, and plants are all in the eukarya. Okay, so that's kind of how those domains are chunked down. But now I'm going to take this domain, learn about it, this domain, learn about it, and this domain has to be broken down even further so we can understand what it is we're talking about and where we're classifying it, where we're putting it. So, every single thing we find on Earth is going to fall into one of these categories. All right, we're going to go through each of these kingdom now. First one is kingdom eubacteria. Okay, eu, true. These are true bacteria. This is, when we think of bacteria, this is the ones that you're thinking of. When you've learned about bacteria, these are the ones that people have talked about. Okay, they are prokaryotic, which means no nucleus and no organelles. Their cell surface, okay? The cell wall is made of something called peptoglycan. So it's not cell wall like a plant, which is wood. When we think of cell wall, this is cellulose, this is cell wall. That's not what they're made out of, all right? They're not like plants. They're made out of something else called peptoglycan, all right? And then inside they have the cell membrane and, the rest, all right? But the cell surface is peptoglycan. The body plan, meaning these things are all uni, which means one, cellular, which means cell. So, one cell. Nutrition. They are heterotrophic sometimes, or they can be autotrophic. Heterotrophic means they eat stuff. Okay? Now, they don't have mouths because they're only one cell big, so they take in nutrients through diffusion, through osmosis, and if you remember that, that's where water and nutrients go in and waste products come out. Water and nutrients go in, waste products come out. And it just diffuses right through the tiny little holes and pores all over the surface of the cell. Okay? So they have to eat stuff. Or they can be autotrophic, which means, auto means self, okay? Trophic is food. So they make food themselves. If you go back up to this one, hetero means different, and trophic means food. So they get their food from a different source. Here, they make their own food. By processes known as either chemosynthesis or photosynthesis. Chemosynthesis, to synthesize, to make food out of chemicals. So what chemosynthesis means is simply they are absorbing chemicals and making food out of it. So in the case of deep sea hydrothermal creatures, those bacterium, they're using the sulfur that's boiling out of these underwater volcanoes and using that to produce sugar for themselves, energy or food. Okay, so to make food from chemicals, and photosynthesis is when you make something using light. So this is when you make food from sunlight. plants have the ability to do this also. So you've probably heard of photosynthesis when we're talking about plants, okay? But in this case, bacteria have the ability to make food from sunlight also, or make food from chemicals. Some examples are just all common bacteria. All right. The E. coli, found in your intestines, just staph, strep throat, staph infections, all of those pathogens, the ones that make you sick, those are just common bacteria. So are the bacteria that's on my skin, on this board, on this marker. It's everywhere. Just bacteria is everywhere. Okay. So all your common bacteria are going to fall into kingdom Eubacteria. Kingdom Archaea. Well, this might be okay. All right, kingdom Archaebacteria does not mean true, it means ancient. Okay, so these are your ancient bacteria. They are prokaryotic, which again means no nucleus or organelles. Their cell wall is a little bit different, and all I need you guys to know is that their cell wall can withstand extreme environments. The cold doesn't freeze it, the heat doesn't boil it, the pressure doesn't crush it. They can really survive in those environments quite nicely. These guys also have unicellular body plan, one cell. They are heterotrophic, so they eat stuff. Or they can be autotrophic, which means they make their own food. But these guys are going to make their food by the process of chemosynthesis. All right, so if I'm deep 7 miles in the ocean, there's no sunlight there. It would not be advantageous to me as a species to make my food from sunlight when there isn't any. If I'm buried deep 2 miles under the ice, again, same thing. If I'm in a volcano, there's no sunlight there. So these guys don't use sunlight. They're just making food from the chemicals that are surrounding them. All right, and then the examples to know. I don't need you to know the names of these bacteria. Just know that you're going to find them in volcanoes, deep in the ice, and in the deep sea.